Justin Terry Hall bought land in southwest Montana at the turn of the century. He and his wife Cherry moved in, and within a couple of years they had a little girl they named Sarah and another baby on the way. So in the year 2002, their plan for the future was well underway. Justin bought some cattle to raise on their 240 acres. The property was largely grazing land, but it backed up to some rocky outcroppings, and beyond them was untamed ground to whom the owner was unknown. A small stream separated his land from the outcroppings, which was where the cattle would go to get their water. At the opposite end of the farm was where the house, barn, and chicken coop were located. He kept a rifle with him, which most of the time meant it was mounted on a quad bike he used to roam the property and to drag big bales of hay out to the cattle and to help supplement the grazing. During the summer months, he had a tractor and big bale hay maker, which he used to create the big bales. When they would get one finished, they would haul it over to a spot where the bales were lined up in rows to be stored for later use. He was on his way out to the tractor while riding the quad one early August morning when he happened to see something brown scampering across the landscape just on the far side of the stream. It looked like it was a human being because it was not moving on 2 feet. Justin had a perspective the other did not, and what he saw was that a big mountain lion was sitting up in those rocky outcroppings, and whoever it was, and as crazy as it sounds, it looked like they were wearing a fur coat and fur pants in August, and that crazy person wearing the fur was about to get ambushed by one of nature's most magnificent predators. Justin stopped the quad and grabbed the rifle out of its holster. He used the quad as a means to steady the gun because this was going to be a long shot. If he acted quickly, there would be time to kill the cat before it leapt on the unassuming being that was moving around on the ground below it. He found the cat in the scope and flicked the safety off of his rifle. It was a big, beautiful cat, and he hated the thought of killing it, but there was just no time to do anything else. Justin placed the crosshairs of the scope directly where the big cat's heart was located and squeezed the trigger. As he did, he pulled away from the rifle because in his peripheral vision he caught movement from behind the human being in the fur coat. The more his eyes were able to take in, the more he became shocked at what he was seeing. While at the same time came the gunshot and the dead mountain lion falling nearly at the feet of the smaller of the two creatures suddenly in clear view. It hadn't been a human being Justin had seen about to be attacked by the mountain lion. At the distance, plus the slightly higher elevation, and then throw in the tall grass he had to look through, it was understandable how he had made the mistake. He saw something moving on 2 feet, and then the mountain lion, and he reacted. Yes, he had noticed the bipedal moving entity was wearing a very strange choice of clothing for summertime in Montana, but understand this all happened in a matter of seconds. There wasn't time to discern whether his vision had been correct in telling him that was one very ugly human being. When you are also noticing the sunlight glimmer off the coat of a big cat perched in just the right spot to attack the bipedal creature, which in his mind immediately registered as being human. Justin had to act and do it quickly. He switched off the quad, jumping off of it before it had even come to a stop. The gun was freed, and he had the cat in the hairs of the scope in a rapid procession of grabbing the rifle from the holster and dropping to one knee while getting the rifle into position and then waiting that split second, which seemed to take forever, for the quad to settle to an absolute stop. And as all that is taking place, his left hand is sliding up the sleek build of that walnut stock to the cold metal barrel that rested the scope where he knocked the dust cover off to the side. His right hand caressed the trigger while he allowed his face to slide into a comfortable position alongside the rifle. There is an audible click of the safety being set free, and his eyes set the target through the scope, and in one fluid, gentle squeeze of his index finger, he ends the drama of one scene and begins that of another. The gunshot slammed the silence of the Montana morning the way a heavy book hits the classroom floor during a midterm test. Immediately following came the scariest, deepest, most guttural sound Justin had ever heard, and he knew what made it too. Just as he squeezed the trigger, his peripheral vision caught more movement, this time from somewhere unexpected. The reason he was able to see it, even though his vision had been focused on the shot, was because it was so damn big. Something very, very big that was also wearing that weird fur coat in the middle of the Montana summer had made an appearance. It came from behind the first bipedal creature he had seen. By now, he was no longer able to confidentially call them human. Clearly, they were not, and he was able to make out that they were not wearing fur coats. They were wearing fur. As his mind is taking in all the details, which on some level are freaking him out, and yet on another level it is registering that the terrifying roar filling his ears is coming from that huge hairy beast, and finally, on the fight or flight level, his self-preservation level, he is able to calm himself, because despite all that had taken place in the last few seconds, Justin understands he's too far away to have much to fear. The truth is, it was an incredible shot that he made. There wasn't time to pat himself on the back, however. This was a once-in-a-lifetime chance to see Bigfoot. He pointed the rifle scope in their direction so he could see what they looked like up close. When he did, the big one again let go a roar, which was enough to cause Justin to pull down the rifle, despite it causing him not to be able to get that close-up view that he much desired. It was a natural reaction which any human being would have received from Justin. What some might have found funny is that they were not human. However, Justin treated the entire situation as if they had been. After putting the rifle back in its holster, he climbed on the quad and started it up. As he began to head the direction of his kill, the two Sasquatch disappeared over the rocky outcropping. When he arrived at the spot where the big cat lay dead, he hollered in the direction of where the Sasquatch had escaped. "Hey, I wasn't shooting at you." Naturally, he received no reply. "I thought the cat was going to hurt the little one." And still he got no reply. "There's no reason to fear me. I would never hurt any of you. I thought I was protecting you." Justin continued to holler similar thoughts in the direction of the Bigfoot. When he felt he had made his case, not to mention that the Sasquatch were probably long gone by then, he headed home with the big cat. It was late enough in the summer that the feline had already begun to get her winter coat, so he decided to skin the animal and keep it. He had no intentions of ever shooting another one, so he figured he ought to make the most of this one. He had no idea what that was going to involve, but he would soon. When the night came, Justin and his family settled in like every other night, but the next morning things were not like every other morning. In fact, the entire family woke up to some extreme chaos happening inside the chicken pen. Justin had created an area using chicken wire that stretched around the coop, and it even had a ceiling made from the same wire, which allowed the chickens to safely roam around the grounds surrounding the coop. On this morning, however, there were two cubs, barely more than kittens, mountain lions, trapped inside the coop with the chickens, who did not appreciate their new roommates at all. The chickens were squawking like there was a mountain lion in their pen. Lucky for them, the cubs were still too young to be any real threat to the chickens. Yes, they were chasing them around a little bit, but as soon as the chickens stood their ground, the cubs backed off. Justin deduced they were able to see, obviously. If that was the case, then there was a chance they would survive. He was left with a lot of unanswered questions. Perhaps his most curious was how did they get into the chicken pen? Well, the answer was as obvious as was those little bags of claws and teeth. The Sasquatch had brought them. He wondered, how did they bring them as a statement? If so, to what end? Were they saying, "Here, you killed their mother, you take care of them"? Or perhaps they were trying to tell him that they could have handled the cat. There was no need for killing it, and now look at the result. 2 orphaned kittens who will likely die. Or perhaps they were left there as a test. What would happen if the Bigfoot had left them as a test of sorts, and that it was planning on coming back to see how the cubs were being cared for? Maybe taking care of those cubs was much more important than he ever considered. Justin talked it over with Cherry. They discussed calling the authorities and turning the cubs over to them. Frankly, any time you involve the government, you can expect worse than when you were before involving them. Thus, both were not thrilled at the thought of calling them. Naturally, they assumed they would be in some sort of trouble for not doing it, because things are no longer like they were in the first 200 years of the USA. Now you have to have permission to do anything in the land of the free. Maybe it wouldn't be so bad if it wasn't for the fact that the government is run by a bunch of uncaring, greedy wastes of oxygen that only care about themselves. Anyway, the decision was made to keep the cubs. They turned out to be a lot of time and trouble, but what else could they do? Justin wasn't sure what was going to happen when they became adults. Both cats were female, which meant they would be easier to deal with than had they been male. But still, any father of a pretty daughter will tell you that a pretty female attracts many males. They went ahead and kept the cubs, and about 6 months later, Cherry gave birth to a little boy. The cubs were near grown by then, at least physically. It was a chaotic but joyful time for Justin. 2 healthy children now living in the world. 2 amazing cougars for pets. The cattle were doing well. There was just a lot of good things happening. There was one thing that was curious, however. It was so crazy he hesitated to even give it any further thought, but it was one of those things where you can tell yourself you didn't see what you darn well know you did, and all the self-convincing in the world won't help. What he saw had been a midget of a man. Maybe the midget was as tall as a man's knee. He, was playing with the 2 cubs, which by now were still cubs only in emotional status. Their bodies were perhaps not fully filled out, but they were as tall as the girls were going to likely get. Justin was reminded of a time when he was a kid in the summer. There was a rash of invasions in the family garden in their backyard. Something was coming in at night, eating things like their cabbage. The cabbage seemed to be a favorite. Naturally, the family was curious what it was that was eating their home-grown vegetables. Justin and his older brother stayed up late one weekend night and discovered the culprit. It was a skunk. Understand, he wasn't entirely sure it was a skunk because everything happened so fast. Later, looking back on it, he was left wondering, did he really see what he thought he saw? Of course, his brother also reacting did add credibility to the fact that he did see what he saw. Also understand that any self-respecting country boy recognizes a skunk probably faster than they recognize any other small mammal, and for good reason. If you surprise a skunk, and you are lucky, it will stamp its feet, make a huffing sound before it sprays that terrible smelling stuff on you. If you are fast enough, you can propel yourself out of range before the skunk gets into position to spray. The whole warning time is maybe 3 to 4 seconds. For instance, the skunk that Justin encountered did the feet stamping as it was turning itself to get into position to spray. So he had even less time to get out of range. And as soon as they saw that skunk, both brothers bolted immediately in the opposite direction. Their speed was rewarded by the skunk not even spraying, an even bigger win than they could have hoped. It all happened so fast. It was at night, they shined a light upon it, and that was when both boys bolted away. After reaching a safe distance, they stopped running and turned to see where the skunk was at. It wasn't there. Did they imagine the skunk? Did their imaginations get the better of them? No, the simple answer was no. They both didn't turn and bolt because of imagination. It was true. He had only seen the animal for literally a split second. Still, he knew what he saw. This situation was like that one. He only saw the little person for a split second, and then he was left wondering if he had seen anything at all. The thing was that in that split second, he saw the little person in control of those 2 girls. The 2 fully sized mountain lions were being manhandled by a dwarf no taller than an average man's knee. There were several reasons for doubt, the least of which being that the man was only 18 inches in height. If he did actually see what he thought he saw, how was the little man strong enough to be able to make the 2 full-grown cougars behave? Yet that was what he saw. The little man had a hand on each one of the big cat's fur, and they were seemingly submitting to his demands. Justin couldn't get that sighting out of his mind. It was just too real, too surreal. Maybe some people can be hit in the face with cold water, and rather than deal with it, they ignore it and hope the matter goes away, even as they are standing there dripping in cold water. Well, that wasn't him. He saw that little man. Finally, out of desperation, to find some sort of lead to explain what he had seen, Justin turned to the internet. He searched little people, plus connection to wild animals, plus Southwest Montana. Truth told, he expected to get some sort of XXX results that if he clicked on them was likely to get him a visit from the weird sex police, but instead he was shocked to see result after result about little people. They were supposed mythical beings which the Crow tribe had great respect. Everything added up. According to the Crow tribe, these little people were extremely strong, abnormally strong. Justin wondered, did that include the strength to control 2 healthy female mountain lions that had just reached physical maturity and were literally in the prime of their otherwise always very strong lives? Consider that question rhetorical. He knew they were able to do just that. Justin was overwhelmed with questions about who it was that had actually brought his family those cubs. Perhaps it had not been the Bigfoot after all. To be clear, he thought this made much more sense than the little people had brought them the cubs rather than the Bigfoot. To his knowledge, which admittedly was no more than the stories he researched on the internet, it seemed much more likely that the cubs were brought by the little people because there were several stories about Bigfoot eating people's cats and dogs. So to hear that Bigfoot would spare mountain lion cubs did not make a lot of sense because that is a direct competitor for food sources. In any case, the possibility of little people was now born. Nothing came of it for a couple of years. Then, when Justin's boy was 2.5 years old, he came down with a fever that was very high. Justin believes the only reason his family never found out the exact name of the illness that had posed such a threat was because they never had to take him to the hospital. Something happened during the night that not only broke the fever, but that left him completely well the next day. The boy claimed he was visited by a man who could not reach the top of his bed's edge without jumping up and landing on the side of the bed. He said the man said some strange language which he didn't understand, and then he touched the boy's forehead and left. The boy said he began feeling better right away. There are stories in the Crow Nation about the little people being great healers. I mentioned this to Justin, and he was not surprised to hear it, though at the same time he was very surprised because it was just one more nail in the credibility coffin. What's even more amazing is that the cats were sleeping in the room with him, which is not uncommon. They are very protective of the children. The fact that they let the little person walk right in there is a miracle in itself. Of course, the little people have some means of communicating or controlling the big cats. We don't know. Of course, it's entirely possible the boy just imagined a visit from a little person. It wouldn't explain how he was able to overcome such a serious fever and illness, however. I have kept in touch with Justin over the years. There were some other things that happened which pointed toward the little people being involved. Maybe one of these days he will contact me with more stories, or maybe I will try and get in touch with them. Thanks for listening. Please hit the subscribe and all the other neat things that YouTube loves you to do. Thanks. Bye.